I'm Sebin and I'll be your host for this early afternoon. May I now request our esteemed guests to please take their chairs on the dais. I invite Honorable Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya, respected Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai, Mr. R. Suresh, and Dr. Matthew to please take their chairs on the dais. So please. Thank you, sir. It's indeed a pleasure to see so many of us here cutting across disciplines, various professions, and even age groups. This goes to say that governance is more relevant today than any time else. And I'm glad also because so many Bangaloreans are here early in the afternoon in this summer. As our director always tells us, summers in Bangalore are becoming the hottest every year for the last decade. So it's great to see the denizens of Garden City coming out when mostly people stay indoors at this time. We're all gathered here for the release of PAC's latest study, the Public Affairs Index, in the physical form of a book and in the digital form as a website. I would like to quote something from the Gita at this point. Vidya Rupam Kurupanam Nirdananam Dhanam Tada Nirbalanam Balam Vidya Sadhaniya Prayatnada. It says that knowledge is the beauty of the not beautiful, the wealth of the not wealthy, and the power of the powerless. And it is attained with great hard work. And at our center, we go beyond this and believe that right knowledge in the right places can create wondrous changes. And our experiences with our work have only strengthened this belief. And here, Bangalore being a cosmopolitan city, I'm sure we have representation from at least most of the states here. And while coming here, all of us may have had questions on which state is the best, or which state is the best in what, or why my state is not the best. So, Pi today will answer all our questions. Pi will tell us why is a state better than the others. And Pi will also tell us, does the successively hotter summers in Bangalore have something to do with poor governance? I mean, for all of those in the audience looking at our respected guest, Mr. Mohandas Pai, may I remind you that Public Affairs Index is also abbreviated as PAI or Pi. So of course, Mr. Mohandas Pai will be sharing his thoughts with us, but of course, Public Affairs Index will also have a lot to say today. Without further ado, may I now start the proceedings of the day with the welcome address. I invite the Director of Public Affairs Center, Mr. R. Suresh, to deliver the welcome address. Sir.
Distinguished guests on the dais, friends of PAC who have assembled in such strength today, and special visitors from outside the state, whom you'll get to hear of soon. Welcome to this function here, which we've organized. It represents a small difference for us. For 2 decades now, for 22 years, the Public Affairs Center has been talking of the importance of citizen voice in decision making and governance matters. And to this end, we crafted 20 years ago, under the guidance of Dr. Samuel Paul, the first citizen report cards, which later evolved into community scorecards, participatory budgeting. It spawned the whole area of social accountability as we know it now. This is in vogue in governance circles all over the world. 22 years down the line, we also felt the need that it's so much work that has gone into provoking government with inputs from citizen experience. Now, what has the government done about it? When the Public Affairs Center promoted citizen report cards 22 years ago, the environment was ripe for the introduction of just such an instrument. In governance circles and in development circles in particular, participatory action was flavor of the month. This was the period in which a number of such efforts were made to involve the general public in the management of programs, in the design, and in the rollout of programs. At that time, the citizen report card was aptly positioned to be able to utilize this wave of change happening and to be able to capitalize upon this level of interest from those in government for citizen views. The citizen report card is now enshrined as a social accountability instrument. Its time has come, it's being amplified, modified, and reutilized in various sectors. But now, as we look at it, from this point of time, we want to know now, how has the government utilized these inputs? Have they been useful? Have they actually resulted in change? Now, in this very same period that the citizen report card and other social accountability instruments were being used, in this very same period, the government also woke up to its responsibilities to address the rights of citizens. And we saw in the past decade the Right to Information Act, the Right to Public Services Act, and so on. Many responses from governance positions towards meeting the needs of citizens, information, as well as material needs. Now, how well have these programs worked? At the Public Affairs Center, we took stock of this about 1.5 years ago when Dr. C.K. Matthew joined us after his retirement from the services. And we decided that let's take the government's word for it. That is to say, let's depend on the data that's available with the government to assess how well the government has been doing. And instead of doing this at a national level, let's do this state-wise. If we were to do this state-wise uniformly across the country using standard statistical parameters, then we could compare them, in which case we could arrive at an index which actually declares which state has done best and which has done second best. We'll find out the results of that analysis when Dr. Matthew makes his presentation. But at the center, we were very clear that this is only the beginning of an effort of this nature. Ranking is only the starting point. What do we need to do with these ranks? We would like to take them out to every state, prepare more detailed analysis where every state can respond to their positions on the various parameters listed in the index, respond to questions on why they are relatively low or relatively high compared to, say, neighboring states, and so on. And perhaps this kind of a dialogue can stimulate a change process that allows them to increase their ranking over the coming years. The Public Affairs Center is prepared to support states all over India in this process of governance reform through improving their ranking on the PI index. The PI score will be an experiment that we will repeat year on year so that we can track change as it happens or decline as it happens. To this end, we need the support of all of you, people like you who are interested in governance, who are interested in sacrificing an afternoon's nap on a Saturday to come here because it is important enough. The change is important for us, especially in the governance system. So with these words, I will stop at this point because Dr. Matthew will have a lot more to talk about the Public Affairs Index and how it was constructed, and perhaps he might share some of the results from that analysis. Once again, a very warm welcome to all of you, and I look forward to rich discussions this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I remind everyone here that we can share our thoughts on the PI score or on the Public Affairs Index on Facebook or Twitter by using the hashtag PI score. It is hashtag PAISCORE. It's not on the banner behind me, but it's on the standee here. So PAISCORE, hashtag PAISCORE. Thank you, sir. Now, may I now request Dr. Meena, who heads the Participatory Governance Research Group at our center, to welcome the chief guest of the day, former Chief Justice of India, Honorable Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya, with a bouquet. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I now request Mr. Jungle, who heads the Environmental Governance Research Group at the center, to welcome the guest of honor, Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai, with a bouquet. Thank you, sir. Now, whenever someone claims that a state is better than the others, or their state is the best, one question which we many a times fail to ask is on what basis or why is that state better? So today we'll dispel all the myths about which state is best and who does best with the Public Affairs Index. So it's only natural that we ask the question, what is the Public Affairs Index? How is it calculated? These are the questions which will now be answered by Dr. Matthew. Dr. Matthew is a senior fellow at Public Affairs Center and the former Chief Secretary of Rajasthan. The whole idea of Public Affairs Index was initiated by him and spearheaded till its logical end today. May I now invite Dr. Matthew to please present and explain the study. So,
Honorable and respected Justice Mr. Venkatachalaya, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India, esteemed Mr. Mohandas Pai, Chairman of the Manipal Global Education, my colleague and Director of the Public Affairs Center, Mr. Suresh, ladies and gentlemen, friends. I must make a special mention of Mrs. Paul here, who has come here to attend this function. Dr. Paul was known to most of us as a friend, philosopher, guide, mentor, and he contributed very many valuable insights while this index was being prepared. We miss him, and this project is dedicated to the memory of Dr. Samuel Paul. What is the Public Affairs Index? If you ask me this question, I would say it is a work in progress. It's an ongoing experiment. And it is an honest attempt to create a device that will measure governance. We hope to create a matrix that will try to portray the complexities of governance of such a large and diverse country like India. But at the heart of this index, there is a question. Is it possible to measure governance? Can you assign values, numerical values, to complex questions of governance of the 29 states of the country, the population of 120 crores? Can we do that? Can we assign values and charts and scattergraphs to such a difficult concept? As we go along, I hope some of these questions will be answered, but as I always say, It is the reader and the audience who are wiser than the writer, and you will ultimately decide. Let me begin by a quotation from J.M. Keynes, who said somewhere in 1931 that the political problem of mankind is to combine three things: economic efficiency, social justice, and individual liberty. And if you think about it, all aspects of governance can fall into these three boxes. All aspects. In fact, I would even go to say world wars have been fought in the conflict between these three concepts. In the PI Index, or rather Public Affairs Index, we are trying to attempt to capture some of these complexities in the indicators that we have decided upon. And somewhere you will find a reflection of these three themes as we go along. Now, why is governance suddenly an important issue? Prime Minister Narendra Modi stated in one of his first public addresses after assuming office that he would maximize governance and minimize government. Suddenly, all over the country, there was an awareness that governance is going to be a key factor in the management of this country. Actually speaking, the responsibilities of the states have been very clearly written out in the Constitution. List 2 of the Constitution says clearly what the states should do, what they should not do. But it is not as simple as that. There are ideological differences across the country, state aspirations which sometimes militate against national goals. So the dilemma before PAC was to find a matrix that would reflect these complexities. And the story of the Public Affairs Index is really an attempt to create that device which would measure what is governance. The Public Affairs Index looks like this. It's a pyramidal hierarchy. At the apex, we have 10 very, very broad themes. We'll come to that now. At the second tier, we have 25 focus subjects. And at the bottom of the pyramid, we have 68 indicators. Let us see how they merge with each other. What are these 10 themes? In tier 1, what are these 10 themes? Essential infrastructure, support to human development, social protection, fiscal management, women and child, environment, transparency and accountability, crime, law and order, economic freedom, delivery of justice. 10 broad themes that every government should be concerned with, should be worried about. And I would like to assume that we have not left out any major area. Of course we have left. We cannot capture all of government in 10 themes. But have we succeeded in broadly giving a representative view of the concerns of the government in these 10 themes? Second tier, arising out of these 10 themes, we have selected 25 focus subjects. They are on the screen. I will not read through them. Each of those themes have 1 or 2 or 3 focus subjects. And at third tier, there are 68 indicators. They're too long to be listed here. But they all combine together to form the PAI. Now, in this combination, you can ask questions. It's a mishmash of combinations, combination of indicators. It's like a potpourri, colorful bouquet. Does it make sense to bring them all together? All disparate indicators being brought together? You will see as we go along. Let me just touch briefly on the methodology we have adopted. We have taken only, and I repeat, only data from government domain. If we had taken data from private sources, we would have been challenged. Where did you get this from? What is the bias of that institution which gave the figures? Is it correct? Is it valid? And while you can say that even government data is suspect at times, but we generally believe that government data would be broadly acceptable. Only for 2 exceptions. Out of the 68 indicators, 66 are government. There are 2 exceptions. One, the ACER report on education, quality of education. And two, a report that came out a few months ago on nutritional levels of children, UNICEF. Surprisingly, that document was not released for several months because of its results, but finally it was released by government. Another interesting factor which I'd like you to notice as far as methodology is concerned is that we have taken 3 years data. It is not a snapshot view. I tell my friends it is not a photograph, it's a video over 3 years. And we have assigned weightages to those 3-year accumulated period. So it is a mix of the latest data and a combination of the variation which took place over 3 years, the movement over the 3 years. Now, the second last point I'd like you to just think about it. Weightages have been assigned to these indicators. Again, you can ask the question, why did you give women 60% and children 40%? Why did you give crime 80% and law and order 20%? These questions can be asked, and valid questions. We may not have answers to it. But we have exercised a kind of reasoned subjectivity, reasoned, it's not whimsical, a reasoned subjectivity to come to this conclusion of assigning weightages to these indicators. And finally, we have aggregated the data at the indicator level, at the focus subject level, and at the theme level to arrive at the final score. Let me anticipate some of your questions. Of course, you'll have many more questions, but let me anticipate. Number one, all data do not coincide on a single date. It's not possible. Government data is staggered. There are some data which is old, 2009, 2012, and some data which is recent, 2015. But we decided to go in for the latest 3, irrespective of the year. We had no other choice. I've already mentioned to you there's a rationale for the pi weightage. I already told you that there are serious statistical questions of how we merge compounded annual growth rate with a snapshot figure of the latest data. And finally, for your easier understanding, we have split the states into large states and small states. Large states mean states more than 2 crores population, small states less than 2 crores population. I tell my friends, why is Public Affairs Index different? It's like the Maggi sauce, it is different. Why is it different? We have mixed, very consciously, we have mixed developmental outcomes with governance processes. People say you can't mix the two. A developmental outcome is like a GDP or the per capita income. We have mixed those figures with governance processes because they are more important in governance. We have identified 68 comprehensive indicators, which we think is one of the highest numbers across the country whenever similar exercises have been done. We have looked at processes, we have looked at institutions, and very interestingly, we have added one whole chapter on sentiment. What is sentiment? Beyond data, beyond statistics, there is a perception of people. Such and such a state is corrupt. Such and such a state is business friendly. There's a perception. So we engaged a private body to look at all the tweets, all the newspaper articles, and process them on certain indicators. And you've got an entire chapter on sentiment analysis added to this report. We have discovered some new variables which people have never thought of before. For example, when we looked at economic freedom, we did not look at the big industries. Most people say how much investment has come in. Rather, we looked at the small industries and their dispersal across the state. And we took an indicator of their asset value as a percentage of GSDP, which has never been tried before. As I said, we reflect current status and movement, and I'm happy to say that it does not read like a very learned statistical tome. It is readable, you can read it, and I hope all of you do read it. And it is being released today, both in the form of a report, hard copy, as also an online report. I would like to end here, and we will listen to our guest today. Governance is a journey. It's not a destination, and our work will continue. Before I wind up, it is my pleasant duty to recognize and applaud the work done by the team which was associated with me, and I'd like to introduce them to you just in 2 minutes. Atreya is here. Atreya was responsible for all the data analysis. He went through hours and days churning the data and giving the recommendations of how they should be put forward. Vivek is the guy who prepared the website and the product of the report you're going to release. In all its visuals and graphics and everything put together, Vivek is the tech man of PSE. Then we had 5 foot soldiers who did all the running around. They're all interns. Happy to introduce them to you. Udita, Rashali from Azim Premji University, and Nikhil from Christ College in Bangalore. They were working in the trenches while we were sitting in our rooms. They are the ones who really did all the hard work.
Thank you, sir. It's indeed a lot of humongous work of more than a year. And I think Matthew sir must have found it hard to compress it all into 10-15 minutes. But sir, thank you for explaining to us as briefly as possible what the PI study is and how states are ranked in the PI study. Thank you, sir. Well, the moment we've all been waiting for, the moment of truth is finally upon us. The release of the Public Affairs Index. It'll no longer be a secret as to which state is doing how well. So may I now request our chief guest, Honorable Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya, to release the Public Affairs Index and also to announce the names of the top 5 states.
Amongst the top states, big states, the first is Kerala. Second is Tamil Nadu. I get a consolation prize. Karnataka is the third. Fourth is Maharashtra. And I'm afraid of announcing the last name, Gujarat. Among the small states, first is Mizoram. Second is Himachal Pradesh. Third is Delhi. Of course, there will be a lot of noise about it in Delhi now. Fourth is Sikkim. Fifth is Goa.
Rankings are also on the screen now. Now we'll be launching our website. So may I now request the guest of honor, Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai, to launch the website. Thank you, sir. A few copies of the book, The Public Affairs Index, is kept at the exit. The website was developed by Shaibig Infosystems and Solutions Private Limited. Mr. Agin and Anas of Shaibig are here with us. Thank you to them. The book and the logo of PI, Public Affairs Index, were designed by Mr. Mallikarjun of Spurana. A big thank you to him. Our social media partner for the event is Pink Lemonade. Thank you to them too. May I now invite Mr. Vivek Divekar of Public Affairs Center to quickly run us through the website as to what all data we can find here and how it is that we could access the whole report and the index rankings, etc. Vivek, please.
I'll just take about 5 minutes and run you through a website walkthrough. This is just a presentation. The website itself is quite interactive. Actually, get whatever information you would like out of it. The website is available at the web address pi.packindia.org. It's available through the PAC website. At this link here on the right top corner. You can reach PAC through various other tools, basically our outreach tools in terms of all the social media links which are available in PAC website. This is the Public Affairs Index website which is available. You will find there are two functionalities on the landing page. If you do a mouse over, that is you just place the mouse over any of the buttons here, you will be able to see this information on the left hand side, that is all the ranking, the state names and the index values which are actually provided the information for the ranking. On the right side you will get the idea of the two other levels of the pyramid apart from the themes, that is focus subject and indicators for each of the themes. The other functionality you have is to click on any of these links and that will take you to the information on for each of the themes. You will be able to see the all the states in color. This is based on the index value. We have provided three functionalities. So you will be able to see the map, you will be able to see the chart. That is a scatter chart, so to give a little bit of statistical understanding how each state stands versus other. And you'll get a straightforward tabular format. Then we have provided a lot of functionality in terms of filter function. So if you want to choose certain states or certain themes, you can mix and match and take a look at the whole thing. So ultimately, the visual needs the write-up, and when you click on the read more button, you will get all the write-up which is aligned into each of that chapter. So you will be able to see the visual and the write-up together and get a good understanding of it. Obviously, we have the entire book provided in the website. This is indexed totally, like how you have the hard copy, you have the entire book on the website. The other option is you can just download the entire book as a PDF and print it out. It's freely available from Public Affairs Center, copyrighted, and we would like you to cite it in all of your works which you take forward. So this is about a 116-page book which is there. The other thing is we had held a lot of other discussions and processes. There are videos on our YouTube. You may want to reach out, and then the other social media links which are available here. Obviously, we are very keen to receive feedback and comments from you people on the entire work we are putting out. It's not only about the website, it can be about the report, and anything you would like to write to us, please feel free to use this option on the website. Our email IDs are here, and you can write into any of us too. Thanks a lot for your time.
So the pie is finally out. All myths dispelled. Now we know which state does well, and we have the data to support our claims. As an American statistician, William Edwards Deming once said, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." So now we have data to make right our claims and to quote in whichever forum we may use. But our surprises for you this evening is not over. We have yet another surprise in store for you. The Chief Secretary of the top-ranking state, Kerala, Shri Gigi Thompson, has accepted our invitation and has come to us this afternoon. May I now invite Shri Gigi Thompson, IAS, the Chief Secretary of Kerala, to come to the dais and receive a certificate. I request our chief guest, Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya, to honor Shri Gigi Thompson with the certificate and a shawl. Mr. Gigi Thompson is an IAS officer of the 1980 Kerala cadre and took charge as the Chief Secretary of Kerala, before which he was with the Union government. So we would also like to offer you a bouquet and a copy of our Public Affairs Index. I kindly request the guest of honor, Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai, to hand over the bouquet and the book Public Affairs Index. Thank you, sir. I now request Shri Gigi Thompson to share his thoughts with us.
Honorable Justice Venkatachalaya, Mr. Mohandas Pai, Dr. C.K. Matthew, my friend Suresh, ladies and gentlemen, it's really wonderful to be here this evening and also to receive the certificate for excellence. You know, a few months back, the World Bank released their assessment of the Indian states based on a criteria for ease of doing business. And Kerala was ranked 18 among all the states. And when that news came, we had a tough time to defend it. And my cabinet was totally angry. They said that we will not accept this ranking, and we will file a case against them. I had tough time to tell my cabinet ministers that it is not something on which we can fight a case, and we should take it with all dignity, because the criteria by which the World Bank assessed the states was quite different. And we should take it as a study for self-improvement. And today, of course, the Public Affairs Center has conducted this study. I was quite surprised when Dr. Matthew rang up to say that there is some study like this is going on, and Kerala has been ranked as #1. And I was pleasantly surprised, and I did convey this to the Chief Minister, and he said, "What a relief." And my Chief Minister is going to fight an election. I don't know how he is going to make use of this. And he said it has come like a breath of fresh air. Friends, you know, as a public servant, I mean, there are a number of public servants here, both serving and retired. And we all know that in government, we should never look for any kind of recognition. I put in 36 years. I got colleagues who have put in more years than me, myself. And the recognition will come, may not come. But very often, it's all brickbats that we receive. Especially from a state like Kerala, where the media is hyperactive. Every day, first thing which I do is to go through the papers to find out whether there is any controversy on what I did yesterday. And it is so difficult to govern. And many of us, I'm a Malayali, I was born and brought up in Trivandrum like Dr. Matthew. And we all ran away from Kerala to Delhi, despite the fact that Kerala is known as a God's own country. I keep saying that, yes, it's the God's own country, but the God is now on vacation in New Zealand. So it's very difficult. So when they say that Kerala is the best governed state, I was just thinking, my God. So if this is governance, and if this is what I am getting recognition for, then there are plenty of other things that can be done. Of course, excellence has no finishing line. And this is something which we need to keep in our mind. That is what Dr. Matthew concluded by saying that governance is a journey but not a destination. Very meaningful thought. Friends, I will only, but I know I have got very little time. I had brought two presentations. There's hardly any time to show you the presentation as such. But one major innovation that we are doing right now is on online auditing. Because most of us who have been government know very well that audit is something which keeps coming every year, but then it's all about what we did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Very often I have to go and defend the actions of my great predecessors before the Public Accounts Committee, and I don't know what happened and I don't know how I defend it. So it makes meaningless. So unless audit is online, accountability cannot be established. So this is something which we did, and I have a great pleasure to inform you that the C&AG has appreciated the work which we have done, and we are going to introduce this from the new financial year. Let me quickly go through this. I will take only 2 minutes. Yeah, this is audit online. Of course, this is to promote accountability, transparency, and good governance. And the details of inspection reports which are pending, if you look at the figures, the number of outstanding audit observation, 18,000 in the taxes department, 1,500 in revenue and disaster management, 1,700 in transport like that. There are 23,000 number of outstanding audit observations, and the total money involved is in crores, 6,000 crores. And we have no answer to many of these queries, and unless we make our officers accountable to what they do in their course of business, governance will not be improved. And the lack of seriousness of state government departments towards audit observations, this is the common refrain from the audit department, from the CAG. So now, because you know that the problem is very cumbersome, time consuming, difficult to monitor, and there's a huge amount of paperwork and a time consuming process of fixing accountability, and we all pray for passing the moment, and is not amenable to analysis, and of course corrective measures cannot be taken due to delay in the processes. Now, the audit online intends to create a robust, scalable enterprise version of IT platform to capture the complete process. And this will facilitate both internal and external audit of government departments and enable all stages of audit to be captured, replied, and followed up. And it helps in quick processing, replay, and compliance with the audit. And these are some of the other features of audit online. And of course, this will facilitate transparency in governance. It will also facilitate accountability, improve efficiency, and strengthen financial management, saves time and effort, and it can be easily monitored, and we can also use corrective measures. And these are the stages of audit, from audit inquiry, the local audit report, draft note, draft para, audit para, and of course, these are the usual processes which are involved in an audit, but then we are making it online. And this is again the activity diagram. I won't go through it for want of time. And this is how we started this. I took over on the 31st of January 2015. The first work which I did was to make this audit online. From February 2015, we started the work, and by end of November, we have tested and we have firmed up the modules. And from next month, April, we are going to introduce this. Of course, I won't be the Chief Secretary then, but nevertheless, my colleagues have done a fantastic job. and they're all thrilled that this can happen. And we made a presentation before the CNDG in Delhi, and he was also very happy to see this, and he is very keen that this is introduced in every other state. And of course, for want of time, I will not go through this. And this is what we have done. And at another, because we talk about governance, of course, it is accountability, transparency, and the responsiveness of the government. And again, permit me a few more minutes. Again, this is a short film. This is a 20-minute film. I won't take that much of time. I will just run through it for a few minutes. This is all, again, something which we did in the month of May last year. And this is based on a phone call which I received from a person who was standing neck deep in water in East Fort during a sudden downpour in the month of May. And we made an inspection. We found that all the drains in Trivandrum city has all been clogged up. It all covered, a lot of encroachments, and there was hardly any drain, stormwater drain to drain out water. With the result that a 7-centimeter rain will make Trivandrum totally flooded. And mind you, this is a place which had plenty of public wells, public ponds, and drains. Today you can't see any one of them. All of them have been covered up. And they have constructed offices, temples, party offices, and whatnot. So we decided to make a forceful eviction of all the encroachments. And to cut the long story short, of course, it was a very difficult task. And Trivandrum city saw the eviction of a scale which was not seen for the last so many years. And finally, we have constructed stormwater drains for 30 kilometers in length, 3 meters width, 1.5 meter depth. And we are very confident that 60-70% of the flooding problems in Kerala can be sorted out in this fashion. Let me quickly go through this. I vividly remember the day when there was a heavy downpour. As usual, the Trivandrum city was flooded. Then I got a phone call from someone. He introduced himself as a person who was standing in East Fort, neck deep in water. And I could sense the gravity of the situation because he was very frustrated in his voice. And he said, "Sir, I am standing in the bus station. I am neck deep in water. Dead rats are floating around. Hordes of cockroaches are flying all around. A pregnant woman was vomiting, and after a few vomits, she fell into the water." And he was saying that it's a horrible situation. What sort of life is this? Is it not your responsibility to see that we put a stop to all this nonsense?
I first came to Thiruvananthapuram as a 10-year-old in 1966.
Like I said earlier, we have 30 kilometers of drain, and the best part of it was this had ripple effects. All the collectors started doing similar operations in their districts, and today almost 650 public ponds in Kerala have been desilted, rejuvenated, and it's such a beautiful sight to see water bodies all around in the state. And if this can be done in a very systematic manner, we can very well mitigate floods in our country. So this is another innovation which we did. In fact, yesterday I had the occasion to present this to the Honorable Prime Minister, and he was very, very impressed. And he said a similar action, how to make this into a very regular feature. So this is something which we could do, and friends, there are the other initiatives which we have done. There is no point in talking about all these things. I'm sure other states are also doing in similar fashion, but sometimes it gets recognized, sometimes it doesn't get recognized. Nevertheless, it is our job to see that whatever opportunity we get, we make full use of the opportunities and do for the public good. This is what we have done. The government's motto is development with care, and that is inclusive growth is what my Chief Minister has always been talking about. And today's judgment or the study also proves that Kerala is number one because of inclusive growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. As a fellow Malayali, I would like to share my feelings towards rain. So whenever I go back home in Kerala and I feel it's getting hotter and hotter every year, I'm always wondering why the rain's not coming. And finally, when I'm in Kerala with the rains, and the rain stop me from going out, then I'm wondering why the rain's not going away. So that is Malayali's love-hate relationship with rain. Thank you, sir, for your speech and sharing your thoughts with us. And speaking of controversies in the media, so thank you for having accepted the invitation. And then when I came to know that you are going to be with us this afternoon, the first thing I did, which is what mostly people will do, is Google you. So the first page of Google came out was a lot of media websites, and I think with the media being as loud as it is today, controversies are something which public figures will have to live with. As a very famous joke about media is that the Great Wall of China can be seen from space, and Arnab Goswami can be heard from space. So without further ado, let me tell you that we are not done. We're not done with the surprises. We have one more Chief Secretary with us here, the Chief Secretary of Mizoram. May I now request Shri Lalmal Sauma, the Chief Secretary of Mizoram, to please come to the dais and receive a certificate as a mark of our respect. I request our Chief Guest, Justice Shri M.N. Venkatachalaya, to honor Shri Lalmal Sauma with the certificate and a shawl. Mr. Lalmal Sauma is a 1983 cadre IAS officer, who's currently serving as the Chief Secretary of Mizoram. May I now request our guest of honor, Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai, to present the Public Affairs Index book and a bouquet. Thank you, sir. Sri Lalmal Sauma, sir, it's indeed a pleasure that you could join us. He was very busy and was attending some meetings in Delhi, but he made time out of his busy schedule to be with us here this afternoon. So may I now kindly request you to please share your thoughts with the crowd. Sir.
Justice Venkatachalaya, Mohan, Mr. Suresh, Dr. Matthew. It's nice to be back in this beautiful city. I was on the Board of Governors and Society of IIM Bangalore for 5 years, from 2004 to 2009. So in that context, I used to come to this city twice a year. So it's nice to be back. And I thank the Public Affairs Center for inviting me to this occasion. And I must congratulate the PSC for developing PAI. PAI is a unique index, different from ease of doing business index, state investment potential index, or human development index. And it is a very timely initiative. I humbly and gratefully accept, on behalf of the state of Mizoram and on my own behalf, your judgment on the ranking of Mizoram in the small category, in the small state category, although it comes as a pleasant surprise. Mizoram, as the categorization indicates, is a small state with a geographical area of a little more than 21,000 square kilometers and a population of a little more than 1 million. The state is entirely hilly, with the hills running in the north-south direction. The Mizo society is homogeneous, egalitarian, cohesive, and very close-knit. Mizoram was a district of Assam till 1972, when it became a union territory. After signing of the peace accord in 1986, it became a state in 1987. 20 years of insurgency took its own toll. During the years 1966 to 1986, that is the year insurgency broke out and the year the peace accord was signed, the focus of administration was on counterinsurgency, and development had to be kept on the back burner. It was only after the peace accord the focus could shift to development. Accordingly, there is a lot of ground to make up. This, in brief, is the background against which the performance of the state has to be seen. Mizoram is perhaps the best success story in the country of the transition from insurgency to an island of peace following the peace accord. Some of the characteristic features of the state which made this possible, to my mind, are, as I have said, the society is homogeneous and egalitarian with a high spirit of fraternity. Rule of law is strong and respect for authority is an innate cultural feature. Civil society movement is highly developed. There are big organizations like the Young Mizo Association, Mizo Women's Association, and Senior Citizens Association, which all play a significant role in creating conducive atmosphere. In addition, the church plays a very positive role in creating a vibrant civil society. General quality of life and sense of justice is high. There is no discrimination on ground of sex. Women play an equally important role in various activities. Literacy rate at over 91% is one of the highest in the country. Unique to Mizoram is the fact that the same language is spoken throughout the state. This partly explains the high literacy rate. However, let me hasten to add that when it comes to financial literacy, we are at the bottom. Against the all India average of 20% on financial literacy, the figure for the state is barely 10%. A lot needs to be done in this area. Social protection is ingrained in the cultural tradition. Health indicators are much better than the national average. The state government has taken several good governance initiatives, including introduction of the following. I need not go through all these details because these are certain measures which other states are also doing, except for the mention that the state government focuses on the, apart from other measures, the state government focuses on cleanliness and sanitation. And I may mention here that right from 1977, that is much before Swachh Bharat, the state government has been organizing Cleanliness Week every year in the month of October, wherein competitions are held on cleanliness at various levels, like the village, ward, institutions, and schools. And conservation of forests and wildlife is also a priority of the government. The flagship program of the state government, that is this new land use policy, tries to wean people away from the traditional shifting cultivation to a more settled one. There is a focus on skill development. These are some of the initiatives that the government has undertaken to provide good governance to the citizens. There are, of course, challenges. Infrastructure is one key area which needs to be addressed adequately. Private investment is another area which is yet to take roots. These are areas where the government is focusing on. I once again thank the PSC for making me a part of this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So I've had the fortune of visiting a few northeastern states as part of my work. And I must say, it's a very beautiful state with its lush green hills, the wonderful climate, and I cannot help but mention the beautiful ladies. And the wonderful people there, they're all very friendly. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you, sir. May I now invite the guest of honor, Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai, to share his words with the crowd. Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai was on the board of directors of Infosys before he moved on to many other boards and is currently the chairman of the Manipal Global Institutes. And he's very active. He's a very familiar face for all of us, especially for people from Bangalore. And so I must say that I'm one of your many million followers on Twitter. He's very active on Twitter also. So please.
Chief Justice Venkatachalaya, Chief Secretaries, we have a few on the dais, the Suresh, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here for very many reasons. I'm one of those who believes that we need a lot of data to understand where states are in this country. I'm one of those who believes that we are a collection of countries and not states. We are 29 different countries in the country of India, and each of these states is as large or larger than a country in Europe. And each state is extremely diverse with a different culture, a different strategy, and different form of governance. And people react very, very differently. And we need to evolve a benchmark as a country to find out what these states are and how these states do. And I'm very happy that Dr. Matthew has got all the data. I asked him about all the data, and he seems to have everything in one single place. So I would say, Dr. Matthew, that I don't think in India anybody has captured all the data, including the Economic Survey of India, one single place as you have done. And for that, I think you require a great round of applause. In India, we are used to making conclusions without data. I do not know how many government officials ask for data before they decide on any thing that need to decide. So I think getting data to decide is extremely important. What I would suggest to you, sir, is that after you have a data, maybe you must have a state-wise plan for improvement. What are the things that the state has to do to come up to an ideal situation? Now, we are state in the 13th level, let's say in economic freedom. What should we do? What are the actions we should take? Maybe you can start a state report and give it to the Chief Secretary of the state and the Chief Minister so they know exactly what has to be done. Because you are provided a mirror to see the face, but then you've got to provide the ingredients how to beautify the face. And what do you think is a beautiful face? Yes, it's all comparison. So even if you do better, somebody could be better. But I think you need a plan for improvement and a state-wise report, and that could work very well. Second, I wonder why the South is always dominating. I know that you had a report why the South dominates. And I think if you see the southern states, they come out very well, barring the northeastern states, which are smaller states. Now, one of the themes I would think is the quality of education is extremely high in the southern states. The gross enrollment rate today is about 30% in the southern states. In Tamil Nadu, sir, it has gone to 42%, which is enormous. And I think Karnataka will be close to 70% in 2030 at the rate at which you're growing in gross enrollment in our universities. So education has been a very important aspect. And maybe an education report on the states. Because if you pick 2 or 3 things which distinguish a state to do very well, because empowerment comes to education, that will be useful. I would also ask you to do some research on how social movements are defined the states. Because if you look at all the southern states, there has been some social movement in each of these states. Kerala had the Isava movement, the Narayan Guru movement, and many other movements. Of course, the communists were there to improve, and they have done reasonably good work. Tamil Nadu had the Justice Party movement and the Dravidian movement, which has empowered a lot of people. Karnataka had the land reforms movement in the modern era of Devarajas, which I think did a lot. And Maharashtra is known for its social movements. I think the states which have had these social movements are the states which are very advanced because they empowered people. Whereas states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, they seem to have lost out on these social movements. Maybe finding out the role of social movements and why society coming together to reform society is extremely important, because how do you give individual empowerment to an individual? All the states exist for us, because in political theory we learn that we are sovereign and we give part of our sovereignty and freedom to a state to rule on our behalf. That's the essence of democracy, and social movements have a lot to play. One other issue which I would like to place before this August audience is, how do you create citizen activity to make sure that we hold our rulers accountable? Unless a state has an enlightened citizenry which comes out and asks questions of the political masters and stands up and questions them, demands performance, I don't think things are going to improve. Yes, in Kerala, every 5 years we change a government. I'm sure the next government, the indications are all, there could be a change. Because, you seem to send a message subconsciously that that's what you're going to do. And it seems to be a norm for the last 25 years, am I right? I don't think a government has come back to power ever in Kerala. And there's a very unique way of the Kerala is doing it, but it's more a sense of disappointment than anything else to do it. But how do citizens come together and engage and demand performance and engage with their political leadership, the politicians, and talk to them and tell them what they need? This is very important because when this anti-corruption agitation was going on with Baba, with Arvind Kejriwal and everybody else in Delhi, there was a debate in parliament. And I think Raghuvansh Singh Yadav stood up in parliament and said, "ये लोग कौन होते हैं हमको पूछने के लिए? हम इलेक्शन में इलेक्ट हुए हैं, हमको पता है कि क्या करना है. ये लोग कौन है?" Now, there is a feudal sense of attitude among our representatives who think that once they win the vote in the election, and many of them do by buying votes, we know it in South India in a very large way, or on a cash basis, they're no more accountable for the next 5 years. So how do we make sure that we are citizens who come together in every city, every town to question and to engage? Because eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And an eternally vigilant population will make sure that the interactions improve and the state becomes accountable. Otherwise, I do believe the state becomes a state of its own, looking after its own interest. For example, if Dr. Ranganath is the chief secretary, he has 6 lakh employees to look after. And Matthew had maybe 7 lakh employees in the state of Rajasthan. The employee issue itself and the emergency provisions or the crisis that happens because of agitation take up all this time. There's not enough time. State governments are very complex beasts, very, very complex organization, which become very inward looking. So the citizens become somebody to be seen at a distance and ignored, and unless citizens come together. So to my mind, one issue which I think we should take forward as a part of the study that's been made to see how to educate citizens, how to, now you have empowered them with data. Now we all know the data. We all know the ranking. So we can go and ask them. So how do you create citizens group all over the country so they could come and engage? So I want to stop here by saying that it's a great day for India and a great day for Bangalore that we had the public affairs organizations coming out with the PI report. And I do hope that based on that, we'll have a state report and a roadmap for improvement. I think it's very important to give a roadmap and comparison data so that chief secretaries and our secretaries look at it and say, this is what we need to do the next 3-4 years, and look forward to the next report, by which time they hope to see an improvement. Now we have this ease of doing business report, which has become a source of competitive advantage for states. And if you make this PI report a source of competitive advantage for states to tell people, look, we are number 2 on the PI report, we are number 3 on the ease of doing business, and we are the best state in India, like Mr. Thompson did, I think we would achieve the aims. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. At PAC, we fully agree with you on the belief that citizens need to be at the heart of things and citizens need to be empowered, which is indeed why we have a citizen action support group within PAC. Thank you, sir, for your thoughts. Now, may I invite the chief guest of the day, Honorable Justice Mr. M.N. Venkatachalaya, to address the gathering.
Mrs. Lily Paul, Sri Mohandas Pai, Sri Suresh, Dr. Matthew, Sri Gigi Thompson, Lalmal Sauma, very respected and distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. It's very difficult to talk after the hurricane speech by Mr. Pai. We have named it the Pai Index. We are not trying to exploit your reputation, sir. This is simply a coincidence. We see the report. Dr. Matthew has tried to hoist all the states with their own patterns. And you can, the prism through which you look at the data discloses either your bias or your political or economic philosophy. And one thing that has happened over these 30 years, I became a lawyer 65 years ago, then chief secretaries were a different cup of tea. Today, they speak the language of the ordinary man. I look at it from the point of view of the human development indices. Some time ago, some 17, 18 years ago, a Chief Justice of the state came and requested me to inaugurate the State Judicial Academy, which they had built. Mr. Ranganath perhaps must have helped them to set up a good building and a good center. He asked me to suggest a theme for the inauguration. I said, why don't you consider legacy of Maqbool ul Haq? He said, who is Maqbool ul Haq? I told him, judges need to know who Maqbool ul Haq is. And just a year earlier, he had passed away. And they had a beautiful seminar on the work of legacy of Maqbool ul Haq. And later on, sometime when I was in Delhi, I received a letter from his lady saying that in some corner of India, Maqbool ul Haq was from Pakistan, some corner of India, his work was celebrated and there was a seminar on him. This kind of thing happened when the human development indices were published. It took only 3 criteria. Was the per capita income. That would capture so many other features. they would have the infant mortality rates. That's a metaphor for healthcare and things like that. And life expectancy at birth. They took this criteria. And Cuba was 100 places above us. It was 47 in the index. When India was 132, I think we have slipped into 138 now or something. This is a kind of a work which holds a mirror to our souls and tells us what we really are. And the parameters that they have emphasized, the human dimensions of it. Morley, in his essays on society and politics, said it is a waste of our short lives to expect governments to be delicate appliances with escapements and balances responding to all beautiful things. It runs by sheer greed and need. And such governments which run on the pulse and pushes of greed and need, they are to be evaluated on the parameters which Dr. Matthew has chosen. I think when, even before they announced, when the book was brought to me, I said, Kerala is number one. He said, yes. See, that's the state which gave Mr. Amartya Sen his Nobel Prize. And even today, the great debate between Jagdish Bhagwati on one side and Amartya Sen on the other is a raging debate. But I think we have seen this through Amartya Sen's prism, not Bhagwati's prism. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say only this. The work that the Public Affairs Center has done is heartwarming. This is an effort Dr. Suresh has given us pioneering new dimensions to its work. The team has done extraordinarily well, and Dr. Matthew has given us the finished product of this year. I think, as Mr. Mohandas Pai has said, just put into scale the kind of contribution social movements have contributed, and what this factor. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to scale it, to scale a social movement. For example, one thing that we can easily say is, in Kerala, by looking at the man's dress and his food and his language, you can't say who he is a Hindu or a Christian or a Muslim. And what are those influences that brought in this homogeneity? And what is the contribution of this homogeneity in the matter of expression of the human excellence that we have evaluated? And then again, there is sometime, somewhere, someone, it happens, that's an inverse proportion between wealth and well-being. It's not always that the wealthy are always well. And there used to be a great leader in Singapore who built the modern Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew. And I think Mr. Mohandas Pai's office is decorated by a big photograph of Lee Kuan Yew. But he laid down a very interesting economic thesis, the Lee thesis. He said, we want development, forget democracy. We want democracy, forget development. This was the Lee thesis, to put it shortly. But most out of the 149 rich countries, 44 of them are democracies. And there's not necessarily an inverse proportion between democratic values and economic progress. They have gone hand in hand, provided there's a great leadership. And these are some of the things which are necessary. I mean, it's something to speak of the Kerala Chief Secretary, the way in which we saw the online audit. See, actually, some cases used to come. The man who was held responsible, accountable for some wrongdoing, the Controller Auditor General raises it several years later. The matter comes to court after the man is dead. And there is a very interesting thing. This is what Justice Khanna's son, was invited to deliver the first Khanna Memorial Lecture his son who is in the field of food products in Chennai, he said, whenever we appoint a chief executive officer of a food company, we choose a man who is 85 plus. I asked him why. He said, invariably the department prosecutes them, and the prosecution takes about 15 years. By that time, the matter is resolved by other natural process. And the two greatest enemies of progress in this country, one is healthcare, the other is the judicial system. And if you don't put into the scales the negative factor of the judicial system, and I think you are unfair to the people. You see, people deserve a judiciary. And we can perhaps, I was in a group of ladies the other day celebrating the International Women's Day. I said, if government is outsourced to women, they can certainly mismanage better. So, today it's heartwarming that, see, what comes uppermost to my mind is the one person who would have perhaps felt gratified and greatly satisfied would be Dr. Samuel Pal. And recently in one of the meetings of the board, we said that we must celebrate his contribution by establishing a Dr. Samuel Pal Center for Learning and bring out a fellowship in his honor. This is a tribute to his initiative, his imagination, and his leadership. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, sir. The next item is the discussion and question answer session on PI. If anybody has questions, they may note this down now. And the questions may be directed to anybody on the panel or could be an open question. Sir, thank you for your kind words. At PAC, we've always been benefited a lot from the guidance of many luminaries. Dr. Paul, our founder, was one who recently left us. And Justice M.N. Venkatachalya is currently the chairman of the board of Public Affairs Center. And even at this age, the interest he takes in our work and the guidance he provides is invaluable. If I may request that the questions please be short and that the speaker introduce himself before he raises the question.
Good morning, good afternoon. So my name is Vinod. I am an urban enthusiast. I am trying to understand how governance works, and I have two questions. One is to Dr. C.K. Matthew. Why were those two particular indicators taken outside the government data, the education and the UNICEF? So what was the reason those two were not taken from the from the government? And the number two is, I'm very much interested in bringing all the stakeholders together in any kind of research. So I would like to understand from Mohandas Pai sir on the importance of academic research into developing a long-term goal for any community development. Thank you.
There's 66 were government domain, only 2, ACER and UNICEF report. Now, when we looked at the government data available in the ministry's website, all the figures about enrollment, retention, everything was there. But nothing was there regarding learning abilities, because it's impossible to put it into a data. And the only source we got regarding learning abilities was the ACER report. Now, why did we take ACER? Because we felt it as a reliability, is accepted in the country, and nobody would challenge it as any other data set would have been challenged. Secondly, UNICEF report on malnutrition. When we divided our women and child, you must have seen one of the themes is women and child, we thought that one of the clearest indicators of the input put in by government is regarding the nutritional abilities of child. Again, we had no data at all regarding stunting, wasting, malnutrition available in the government domain. This was the only document available. And we thought UNICEF was a good enough agency whom we could rely on for the data.
Make research important for societal development. That's the question, right? Now, we are in a very dynamic society which is growing at 7.5% real terms, in 13%, 12% in nominal terms. And in 5 years, if you grow at 12, 13%, you essentially double your economy in nominal terms. And when you double the economy, you are a very different country from what we were. Now, how do we understand the distribution of this growth? What is the impact is happening upon society? So for that, we require data, and the data has to be the latest data, so we can analyze and come out with policy initiatives to pinpoint where we need to act. Now, the policies, unless they're based upon data, you will not have any usefulness. To give you an example, they said that 44% of our children are malnourished as per the 2005 data. Until 2015, we're talking about that 44%. But from 2004-5 till 2015, the economy has possibly gone up 4 times. And there's been a tremendous amount of development that's happened. And the whole scenario has changed. But we're talking about something which is so old without knowing what is happening. So we won't be able to say where should we invest and what needs to be done. Today we are working on an educational policy report for Karnataka. We're looking at data. And if you look at data, the northern Karnataka districts are 3 to 4 times behind the southern districts. And there's a divergence in the last 10 years between the north and the south. Now, if government studies the data and says, we have to invest in this area, in this part, our academics come up and say, this is what you need to do, and come to them, I think it'll be very useful. And lastly, you know, there is a question of resource allocation in our country. Resources are scarce, we don't have money. Where do we allocate our resources in a scarcity situation which gives us the highest return in terms of human development? What should we do? I think, how will you decide? And for this, we require a lot of research by academics, many multiple institutions, and these have to come up before decision makers. There have to be debates in societies, and society and citizens have to come and talk and to speak. Friedrich Hayek, who was a contemporary of Keynes, I think you often used to say that you need to have countries develop based upon the institutional mechanism that you have. If there are multiple institutions, the countries can develop. The lack of institutions will always hold back a country from developing. And that's why having multiple research institutions, giving us data, talking on the basis of data, I think is very important. And what Dr. Matthew has done is unbelievable, looking at the huge amount of data, crunching it, distilling it in a few figures where we can touch and feel. I forgot one point, sir. Maybe you should have case studies of best practices in each of these areas. For example, Kerala is number 1 in 3 or 4 conditions. In that particular category, what are the best practice Kerala did and why you think it is number 1 based on data? And that will be an indicator for Mizoram to next say, do that and beat Kerala.
Hello, sir. Here is one question. I am a writer. First of all, I would like to congratulate to both the chief secretaries who has came from Kerala and Mizoram. Sir, my question to Chief Secretary Kerala. Sir, Kerala state has become a #1 state in good governance. I'm very happy about this thing. But your neighbor states and other states has not become a good governance states. What are the default you have seen in other states and what are the problems you have got? Give your brief assessment on my question.
Are you from Kerala? You're from Kannada, thank God. No, it's very difficult for me to say why the other states are not performing as well as Kerala, because it all depends on the criterion by which you look at the development. There could be some other criteria and then the results would be different. It's all based on the criteria. Like the World Bank looked at certain criteria and they said we are only 18. And Dr. Mohandas Bai looked at some other criteria and he says that Kerala is number 1. So it's not, it's not sacrosanct. It's not, should not say that, because of this we are the best. Okay, certain criteria we are good, certain others we are not. That's all I can say.
I was just talking to my daughter this afternoon driving down. She was telling me, 20-year-old, Daddy, I want to become an IAS officer. Why? I want to serve the country, address the issue of social justice. I told her, Ma, this is not that easy. I've interacted with some IAS officer. The politician will be a big stumbling block. No, it's difficult to take on them. No, Daddy, I will learn how to handle them. I don't know whether I was discouraging her. My question I was just sharing with Mr. Mohandas Bai and Justice. about how to, see, once we elect our representatives, 5 years you can't do anything. Can we do a system, evolve a system like this? Can a citizens vote during the course of 5 years? And then we can pull them down by amending our constitution. Is it possible? In my view, that our bureaucrats can manage better in their absence, in case we have to pull them down.
Raw, amorphous public opinion is civilized and distilled through a filter into something which you can hold between the forefinger and the thumb. From macrocosm to microcosm, the election is that filter. That is the test by which the policies receive approval of the people. But today, the political behavior is such that unless you have independent institutions to check the behavior of political behavior, it is not possible, because they have virtually made a monopoly of it. This is what happens even in a parliamentary democracy. You know, in a presidential system, there is greater stability and less accountability. We have a parliamentary system which is supposed to have less stability and more accountability. Even the best of accountability, the pattern is this, as Mr. Pai said, who the fellows are to tell us we have been elected, go to hell, we do whatever we want. And this requires serious thinking on the part of the electoral mechanisms. More than that, you have to have a law regulating the formation, internal democracy, funding, accounting, auditing of, and the behavior of political parties. This has been one of the serious topics that's being discussed. Unless you have a regulation of political parties, this kind of discipline won't come in. The internal democracy is absent. They are all hierarchical bosses in all the parties. Every party has become a dynastic party, and people die nasty, that's all.
Has a lobby. Dr. Matthew knows about it. He faced the Gujar agitation. It is a lobby. Now the Jats have won. The Jats have won the right to get reservation. They've held the state to blackmail, and the state is going to pass a law for reservation. The Supreme Court is going to strike it down. But they won. So the key to a good democracy is that each of these groups of people come and assert their rights and agitate, and the responsible political parties and the politicians have to give something to each one of them to keep hope alive and keep the momentum going. So if you don't organize and come together and just come scream and dance, you're going to lose. So please understand, it's nothing about getting them back to power, voting them out is no use. You have to get things, and they respond to you. Politicians respond to the electorate. Please, they respond. We have seen it happen. They respond to us very much today, because we can use public opinion to mobilize against them. Sir, we have a survey every year in BPAC where we give the performance. And it is a survey, it's done with people, we do it independently. They all respond to it. They all are calling and telling us, come and tell us what to do next, how to improve performance. So please remember that.
I think one of the key issues in governance is the responsiveness of the system to problems that arise from day to day, not major strategic problems which are 20, 30 years ahead. What is to be done today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow on some issue. Now, of this, I was also associated with administration like my friend Raghunath for some years. And one of the things that I remember very clearly, soon after I had left office as Deputy Commissioner of Mandya district, which is the collector of a district in Karnataka, I met a gentleman who was looking after, at that time, rehabilitation of ex-servicemen in the Ministry of Defense. He said, do you know something about your service? He was being half jocular, half critical. He said, I had written on behalf of the Directorate General of Resettlement or whatever that organization, asking what are the different schemes available for ex-servicemen in your state or in your district. Would you please let me know what are they? And also, if you would like to have a list of ex-servicemen of your district, we would like to follow it up with them also. He said, I think at that time there were 531 or some number of districts in India. He said he wrote, there were no emails then of course, he wrote or telex or whatever it is, all 531, and he got out that day I was much more proud of it than all the other achievements that are being talked about from day to day. In other words, I think what we have to build into the system, and this, I think, I'm sorry to say, doesn't depend on machinery or electronics or communication systems or anything of that. It depends on building the human material which is in our administration. And I think we have really failed in doing that, and we continue to fail, and we continue to find where we tackle it as a real live problem needed to be tackled day to day. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Shilpa. I'm an ex-employee of PAC, and very happy to see my colleagues here. Bangalore Political Action Committee, where Mr. Pai is a VP. My question is to Dr. Matthew. Data is the main thing that played the entire backbone of today's comparison between the states. So how is the efforts laid down towards improvement of this system data by the government departments? I mean, like, it's just an expectations, or are we made some efforts towards looking that next year the data is going to be updated by the government department? Something like a roadmap for improvement. Any efforts on that?
So, as you know, this data has been collected over the last 8 or 10 months. And Mr. Suresh has already declared that we'll be carrying this forward in the years to come. So what we will do is that we will delete the data of the last year, the third year, and take on board the latest data. So we'll always have a 3-year period for comparison. I'm happy to say that some of the ministries respond very well, putting up their data immediately. As soon as the financial year is over, they put it up. But unfortunately, a large number of departments are very, very slow. In fact, certain areas we found 2009, 2010 data, even current. They have not updated it. So really we are dependent on the state of efficiency of the ministries concerned. We have decided we'll take the last 3. And if it is 2008, 2009, so be it. Because we cannot have a database created here which will reflect the whole country. We can only depend on Government of India. As regards the roadmap, I think this is something we'll have to talk about, whether we have the clout to recommend a course of action for any scheme, and whether the government will adopt or accept that recommendation, something we'll have to think about. We'll work out a strategy towards that. Thank you.
Annual study coming out year on year, and the work is just beginning from now.
Hi, my name is Aditya. I promote solar and wind all across the world, and I'm involved in the operations in Asia. Outside of Sun Edison, I'm also trying to promote an education idea that I hope to scale in the coming months. So this is basically what I do, but my interests lie in sustainable development. And my question, I have 2 questions, both relevant to education, but also applies to the governance area. So the question is that in the coming years, cities are going to get more populated. There's going to be it's going to get more crowded. Problems are going to get bigger and more complex. So if we have to promote governance, how do we retain the talent to promote governance at scale? So that's one question. And the other question is, given that the education industry in this country is constantly evolving, and we don't have a research focus in our school systems or the college systems, I mean, not as strong as at least I would like. And so we see that switching jobs or switching careers is very, very common. So one is, how do we promote expertise in certain areas that seem relevant to solving our local problems, like say manufacturing? And the second is, how do you promote accountability in the education system for students? I'm open to anyone.
Fertility rate is 2.3 right now, the latest data, and the whole of South India is below replacement rate. Please, 1.8. The whole of South India is below replacement rate. Replacement rate is 2.1 for fertile women. And if you look at Kerala, it only grew 5% in the last 10 years as per the census. And out of the 5%, the great majority was immigration from Bihar. So they're going to disappear in the next 30 years because the population is not growing. They're going to be the state that ages the fastest. So if you look at this, we are stable, and the whole issue of overpopulation, all that thing is becoming past. What we are going to have is a larger number of senior people, smaller number of children. So what we need to do will change and will probably stabilize in the next 10, 20 years. In the south, it will stabilize in the next 5, 7 years. 10, 15 years later, in mid-India, UP, Bihar, and it will have its own repercussions. But the bigger issue which I want to place before you is, today, the urban population, as per the new law passed by Parliament, I think in 2012 or something, is that the urban population is 34%, has 26% of the votes in Parliament. And the rural population today has 74%, and the rural-urban delimitation is frozen till 2031. So it was last done in 2001 in the Vajpayee years, and now that is frozen, and that is the key issue for governance that has to be faced. That you're going to have a situation where the urban areas have more population, lesser votes, they pay 75% of the tax. The rural areas have more votes, maybe lesser part of the population pay 25% of the tax, and then we're going to have politicians who are going to take power from the rural areas, rule the urban areas, and ruin both areas because they don't know how to manage this imbalance. Now, as far as you spoke about research in schools and colleges, right? I agree with you that we don't have funding for research, especially in schools, for pedagogy, for research, for fundamental research or applied research, but there's a larger issue. I think we should discuss outside.
Yeah. So my question is to Dr. Matthew. For the purpose of analysis, we've divided the states into large states and small states. And I want to know how relevant would the analysis remain when we have a state like Delhi, which is much more advanced legislative processes in comparison with states like Mizoram. And that's something that I want to know, sir. Yeah, thank you.
If you look at the last few pages, we have given a composite ranking also. It's not only big states and small states, we have ranked them 1 to 29. So the purpose of separating them was because we found it is really difficult to think of a very large state like Uttar Pradesh or Bihar and compare it with a state like Sikkim or Manipur or any other state. The problems are of completely different scale. Now, why Delhi came into a small state? As I said, the only criteria is population. We took 2 crores as a dividing line. And surprisingly, Government of India also, in many of its websites, have distinguished states on the basis of population. So we just followed a pattern, but for your study, go through the last pages, you'll get a composite ranking.
Sujaya Rathi from C-STEP. My question is to Dr. Matthew, is that you mentioned that there is a mixture of development outcomes with the governance processes. So I just wanted to understand whether you have considered the sustainable development goals and its targets and indicators in this process. And I had a second question too, and that's about going forward, about if we want to do this on a city level, how do we get data? Data that we have for, say, service level benchmarks, etc. We know that all of them are, they're not reliable. So how do we, we can frame an index very well, but then how do we really apply and know the real story? That has been my challenge.
This PAI is really a composite of outcomes and processes. Question you are asking is whether we have taken into account SDG. Now you know that SDG is just beginning, 2015. We have kept in mind the MDG, Millennium Development Goals 2000-2015, to look at processes, how they have changed. There was a question raised during our internal discussions. Are you mixing these two? Should it have been only governance or only developmental activities? We felt that the two are inextricably joined together. You cannot separate processes from outcomes. So the only way that you can get a composite picture of the state is by taking a judicious mix between the two. While doing that, as you go through the last pages, you'll find several of the indicators we have taken pertain to SDG, but maybe in its avatar of MDG. SDG will come later. So keep that in mind, that we have considered your aspect. As to whether it will feature in future reports, we will certainly consider this in some more detail. About city-wise, I really cannot tell you. Municipal corporations do have their own database, all municipal corporations across the state. and it is maintained in their state-wise websites. You can get it. But as to how reliable it is or not, I am in no position to comment.
My name is Ravi. I'm a market research professional and I've developed a keen interest in governance the last couple of years. I'm quite happy to see this coming out. This is something even I've been dreaming for quite a couple of years as of now. I just have an observation. Bulk of your input is secondary data. I know it's also much more efficient to use secondary data for this kind of an index, but I guess you also would have thought about it. Very valid input would be primary data, public opinion, in terms of large-scale opinion polls. I'm not talking about the opinion polls that typically happen during elections. The motive is totally different. But opinion polls that can happen on a yearly basis, where we can try and understand what the people think about what's happening to them, what is the kind of expectation they have. This also, to a certain extent, would address Mr. Pai's view in terms of how do we engage the public on these movements. One way of engaging them is to hearing their voice and kind of incorporating into this kind of an index. Thank you.
There is a complete chapter called sentiment analysis. Apart from data, apart from the statistics which are hard facts, we've also looked at sentiment. What is perception of people? Problem is we cannot include that in our data because our findings have to be really based on hard facts. What sentiment analysis does is it looks at two things: articles in newspapers. By searching out certain keywords, there's a search machine which goes to certain keywords, and also with tweets. So this is an amalgamation of articles and tweets, and you get a sentiment, perception of what the person thinks about a particular state. That is here, but unfortunately we cannot and shall not include it as part of our final data analysis. We can't do that. It's all based on opinion.
Thank you, sir. Any further questions could be emailed to the team. The contact details would be available on the book, which are provided at the exit. And also you could tweet to the PAC handle if there are any further questions. Please remember to use the hashtag PAISCORE. The next, after this enriching discussion, what we need to do now is to commend the effort taken by the team behind PAI for having put up such a long and laborious study which has come out as in this book and as a website. Along with Dr. Matthew, I would like to call out the names of the other people who were part of the study. I request all of them to please come to the stage and receive a copy of the Public Affairs Index. Atreya from Public Affairs Center. Vivek from Public Affairs Center. You may all come on stage and then we'll hand over the book to them. Udita from Symbiosis School of Economics, who's an intern. Priyanka, again from Symbiosis. Vrishali and Nikhil from Christ College. I request that all of them please
So we like to say that all of us have a share in the pie.
Indeed, and a well-earned share, I would say. Before we go to the vote of thanks, let me just announce that tea and snacks will be served outside. Please do join us in the tea. May I now invite the Administrator of Public Affairs Center, Mr. Iyer, to deliver the vote of thanks. So.
Respected dignitaries on the dais, and all of you have gathered here to witness the launch of Public Affairs Index. Public Affairs Center expresses its deep sense of gratitude to Mr. G.G. Thompson, former Chief Secretary, Government of Kerala, and currently Advisor to the Chief Minister of Kerala, and Mr. Lalmal Samwa, Chief Secretary, Government of Mizoram, for sparing their valuable time and explaining the salient features of governance initiatives they have been taking in their states. Our thanks are also due to Mr. Mohandas Pai, for launching our website on Public Affairs Index and putting forth his views on governance issues. We are also deeply indebted to the faculty and students of the National Law School, University of India, Bangalore, and Aziz Premji University, who had facilitated in the preparation of Public Affairs Index by providing academic insights on relevant aspects of governance. We are deeply grateful to all of you for having spared time for this event today. We will need your support in the months ahead to promote the use of tools like Public Affairs Index in public discourse to advance transparency and social accountability in governance and public policy. Last but not the least, we are ever grateful to our chairman, Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya ji, who has been a constant source of guidance and inspiration to all of us in Public Affairs Center to explore innovative areas in governance and public policy. Thank you.
As we all move out for tea, if anybody has not yet registered on the sheet put outside, you may provide us your email ID to be informed of future events at Public Affairs Center. And once again, thank you all for being with us this afternoon.